Hey, welcome everyone to the August 2020 monthly ArchiCAD user webinar. My name is Eric Bobrow, and I'm speaking to you from San Rafael, California, where it's a little smoky because we've had some really weird weather the last few days with lightning storms in the middle of the summer, which is rare, and actually dry ones. I mean, it was even weirder. So a lot of fires have started up. I want to welcome Duane Valencia down in Southern California. How are you doing, Duane?
Doing well, Eric. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm glad we'll be able to take a look at some of your work. We'll also be having Roger Shafer, one of my longtime clients, who's just having a little technical issue connecting up. Let me just see if he's now been able to reconnect. So we'll do that. Let us know that you can let me know that you can hear us and see the screen and see my webcam or our webcams as well. While we see if Roger can get in, let's talk Duane. So Duane, you and I have known each other for a very long time, although not well, because we've each been doing our own work with ArchiCAD, but you're one of the few people who I've ever talked to who's started with ArchiCAD before I did. I started in 1989 with version 3.4 or 3.42. You said that you started late 80s. You weren't sure the exact year, but it was 3.14. Is that right?
That's the one.
Yeah.
I can still remember the blue box.
So yeah, the blue box. You're talking about the dongle?
Well, actually, it came in a box. We didn't download this forever. It used to come in the mail. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I remember the manuals back then were really thick, and they got even thicker and thicker as we got up to ArchiCAD 5 and 6 and 7. I mean, it was just big, thick box. No one would ever go through all of them. And of course, they've turned them into digital assets here. Now, Roger, it looks like your phone line is open. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hey, hooray. Okay, so we are past the that technical hurdle. Awesome. So Roger, welcome. I've known you for a fair number of years as a client with ArchiCAD and particularly in the training program. And you actually have a good connection with Duane. Tell us a little bit about how long you've been using ArchiCAD, because we just did that with Duane, and when you were studying with Duane.
I started with 4.5 and Duane was instructing. And I pestered him until he finally gave me enough information to start designing on my own. So it all comes from Duane's input in the beginning.
It's Duane's fault. Yes, absolutely. All right.
Where have I heard that before?
Yeah. All right. I just want to welcome some people. I see that people have responded saying that they can hear and see us. So Richard Matthews down in Australia, and Raul Raquela, where are you calling in from? Rick Skorick, I know, is in Tokyo. Brett in Queensland, Australia. Mark Benner, hey, from Chicago area. Lou Bishop, hey, Duane, you know Lou very well. Yeah, and maybe we'll even get him to talk a little bit, because he was also down in the desert area thing. So Kelly from, I guess, Texas, Kelly Morgan, and Cinda. Welcome, Cinda is just getting going with ArchiCAD. Yeah, a whole lot of Chris Iliff, Caitlin Kelly, welcome, Michael Boreski, yeah, from all over the place, John Thompson, Richard Bath in Bermuda, David Lohmeyer, Coastal Virginia. All right, we're good. Do we have anyone from the UK or Europe? Not seen so far. So Mackenzie from LA. So usually we do get some people, even though it's a little late there. It's 9 o'clock in the UK. Rob Warren, all right, and Chris Ego both from the UK, and Maria Tkachenko from France. Okay, awesome. We are good. So what I wanted to open up to start out with is taking a look at Roger's your work, because you're what I would call a typical isn't quite the right word, but a user who's focused on getting the job done. You're not really focused on being a teacher, an evangelist, helping others with ArchiCAD. You just have your design practice, your firm, you're doing work for clients, you're getting the job done, and you are, in addition to just being a sharp guy trying to figure out the best ways to do things, you actually take action to implement and set up in your file some very interesting things. And so you're always asking me interesting questions in the ArchiCAD training and coaching program. Wanted to, have you show a little bit about your work in terms of project, one or two projects, and then we'll take a look at your template, because I was so impressed to see all the things that you had arrayed out in space. So let me make you presenter here, and that way we'll be able to see your screen. So Roger, I'm going to make you presenter. So you will see a notification saying, go ahead and share your screen. If you have more than one screen, you'll have to choose which one. And let's make sure that we're good. Okay, so I am seeing your screen with navigator and organizer on the left. It's all these palettes. So perhaps it's the other, maybe your other screen is the main one. You'd want to go to the GoToWebinar and say share the other screen, because right now we're not seeing the project, we're just seeing all the palettes.
All right. Sharing, show screen. Did that change it?
Yeah, now we're seeing a 3D view of, a little house with stone facade and things. All right, so tell us a little bit about your work. I know you have a background as a contractor and did a lot of framing and actual being on site building stuff. And at what point did you start design? And was that from the very beginning? And when did you start using ArchiCAD?
Well, as a framer, we were having trouble getting plans and changes in a timely manner. So I saw you present ArchiCAD at a building conference way back when, and ended up buying it, playing with it, figuring it out, and started off drawing simple stuff, and then it snowballed to where I couldn't frame anymore because we had so much CAD work in-house. And so that was back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
and
so you actually saw that you saw me demonstrate ArchiCAD. This is not Duane, this is me, Eric.
It was you and the general contractor I did a lot of work for. I went with him to a presentation or a meeting, and you were out front of the room, and we checked it out further and ended up buying it. And he was too busy to do it, so I did, and I've stuck with it ever since.
Okay, excellent. And so that goes back to mid 90s. ArchiCAD 4.5 would have been probably around 94, 95 timeframe. So anyway, so you got so much design work that you no longer needed to get on site. So tell us about the type of projects you work with, what type of clients. You're located in the California wine country now. You used to be down in Southern California.
I started with, in Riverside County, a lot of properties were 5-acre minimums and 2,500 square foot minimums. So that's what I started drawing. There were very few room additions. It was all one-off customs. And I ended up moving into one of the customs I designed and built. And so I was right in the heart of it. And I've done over 300 homes on 5 acres, as large as 8,000 feet, but mostly between 3,000 and 5,000. And then 5 years ago, we moved to Northern California, and it's completely different. I've done a lot of room additions and a lot of smaller homes. This home is in Magalia, which is right by Paradise, and it was on a lot that had totally burnt. And so it's a little 1,700 foot with a big garage, and they're on half-acre lots.
Okay, so 300 projects over the last 25 years. That's a lot of volume there. So I imagine you found ArchiCAD to be a pretty effective tool. Let's take a look at this project. So just show us a little tour around, and then let's take a look at a section, things like that. Just get a quick sense of.
This is on a piece of property that drops 12 feet from the front to the back, and he didn't want to put in all the concrete for the footings, so we put in some cripple walls around, and then there's an RV pad by the garage. He's got a shed in the back with his Harley motorcycle in it, and he wanted to be able to drive up this side to the street. So we've got a little retaining wall up here. And then he's in his 60s. He wanted to prep for wheelchair access. So this is all pretty much level, wheelchair accessible into the front door.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has a sunroom and a deck. And they do get some snow, but not too much. And the rain is probably up to 50 inches at times.
Whoa.
So in the year, not
at
one time.
So can you bring up a section? And let's just see. By the way, how far are you along in this? Is this project done? Is it in design development, or where is it at?
I see I got a couple of things like the driveway is not showing up right, but for the most part, I submitted it to structural, and the truss company, there's a step ceiling back here in the master suite. You can see a little bit of it. And trying to get these trusses to all fit with a step is something we need to clear up front.
Can you turn off the roof layer so we can see the trusses? Or have you modeled the trusses?
But I don't have trusses in it because I don't have
okay.
Truss counts.
Then can we see a section? Yeah. What do you have?
Yeah. So most everything I try to put as much into the model as I can, and I don't detail a lot of stuff on my elevations. I try to detail more of everything in the sections. A lot of times you'll have the exterior will show in the same as the section, so I put all the detail there. And Duane will probably see some familiar stuff here. I try to do as he taught me, but along the way, I've kind of lost the perfection that Duane has. So you can see I put in a separate truss and then plywood and then a comp. And the reason I do that is down on the ends, where the truss stops behind the fascia, the plywood comes into it, and then the roof comp goes over the top.
So can you select each of those? Roger, can you just select each of those so we can see that they are separate elements? Because that's I want to make that clear.
You showed us this once. You start with the roof outline, and then you duplicated it and make it smaller for the plywood, and then duplicate that and make it for the comp roof.
Just select the top. So you can see each of those are separate elements. They have the same slope, obviously, and they do have a slightly different extent in terms of going out a little further. Okay.
And then I separate them by a 64th, so you get the line. When you zoom in, you can see the line, but when you zoom out, you can't see the separation.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't have to draw all those lines back in. And if you don't put the plywood and the comp, and you just work off your roof outline with the roofing material on that, the top of your fascia board shows.
Mm-hmm.
And in some projects, I'll even put in the drip metal. I have that as an object that we've created, you have to use two different ones. One has the roof pitch, and the other one is just square for the gables.
Right.
And then the soffits, I don't have anything other than a solid element operation to clip this little piece of fascia board. So it's not that big of a deal to go around and clip it in 20 places. Just something I chose not to do on this because of budget. And
now, is the insulation all 2D?
No, the insulation is a fill.
So it's a fill 2D.
So, yeah, and this is one of Duane's objects that allows me to put in a block. I can change the bottom plate and top plates and turn the insulation on and off.
Can you just stretch things? I know it's stretchable. That's always interesting.
Yeah. You can adjust it to the wall, and it's a real good 2D tool. Here's the same with the insulation turned off, and then here's where the bottom plate is a header, and you can adjust that header size with the structural information.
Okay, so that's smart. I would call that smart 2D in the sense that it's, parametric. You're determining, what components are visible, etc. Now we're seeing here the beginnings of your template. So let's just start switching over to focusing on that rather than just on the project. So in this section, you have a whole bunch of components that are off to the side that won't show up in a working drawing, but you can literally copy and paste or drag into the working area. Is that right?
Yes, and a lot of this is preset just to make it quicker. It's all on the right layer. It's all the right size. I can just grab it, drag it in, and shrink it down. I've got different elements in here preset, so I can just grab these and copy them. A lot of times for notes, it's easier for me just to drag notes around than it is to try to go in and set them up or to retype them. And also using this, I'll see something and I can, if I forget, I go through all of this and it's right there. It reminds me to put this in, put that in.
Okay, so it performs a function, a little bit of a checklist. Do I have this note? Do I have that note?
Yeah, and then this slop on the side is from the last section. Instead of deleting it, I just moved it out of the way, and then I can drag it from here easier.
Okay, so when you start a new section, how do you get all of this 2D stuff into it? Do you save all of these in sections in the project and just move the section marker around, or do you? By the way, there's a picture.
There's my 3D count.
No webcam, but there's Roger.
So here's my sections from the last job, and obviously I don't need all of them, but they all have that template set into them, so I don't delete them. I just move them over here to this pile.
Okay.
And then this is the last house and the house before. I just moved them out of the way.
Can you just zoom out to fit in window for everything there?
Well, let me turn it all on.
Okay, so while you do that, let me just explain. So David Lohmeyer asks, so the sections are embellished with smart 2D objects. Yes, basically there's a lot in 3D, but there are things that are added on top for framing in this case that are smart. And then of course, there's just a lot of notes and things that Roger can bring in very quickly because he uses them frequently. So what we have here, and I'm gonna let you give us a little tour, but I'm just gonna say, Roger has taken the idea of what I call the interactive legends of visual favorites to he's taken it a long way. Now, the general idea here is that if there are things that you've done in one project that you're going to use in other projects that you frequently need, then why not sort of save it so that you have quick access? And sometimes you're going to have that access and just move things like the notes that he has into position. Sometimes you'll use the eyedropper to say, oh, I'll need one of those. Sometimes you'll copy and paste, depending upon how this is arrayed, saying, I'll leave it in the kit over here, but I'm going to copy and paste or drag a copy over to the working area. Now, all that stuff off to the side is not shown in the working drawings. Of course, it has nothing to do with this project. It's just, tools, resources, etc. Now, this is messy. And Roger would be the first to admit that, yeah, it's all thrown around, but he knows where everything is and he can quickly go get something. So Roger, show us where your wall types are. I remember that I was impressed just how you did a little marquee and then you were able to pick up some wall types.
Real quick, I just wanted to show why I have these PDFs. This is plan check correction for another house in Butte County that goes with the house I'm drawing here. And all my notes are scattered in here so that when I'm working on electrical, I can go through the list of notes and pull out the ones that apply to this house. But they're all on the proper layers and everything.
Yeah, so right now you've turned on all the layers just so we can see. Yeah. But obviously when you're working on the electrical, you only have certain layers showing, so you're seeing the electrical stuff.
And these are some of the details I use a lot. We're in a high fire zone, so we have to do special things for venting. Here's some typical foundation sizes that I can put them in right the first time instead of waiting for structural. And when I do put in some notes, I have them all set up because it takes time to change all of the alphabet or the numbers and making sure I get everything in the plan. So when we go over to these sheets are set up like plan sheets or the different layer combinations. So when I go into framing, a lot of my framing notes are right there that I can just grab. But what Eric was talking about with the walls and wow, I just lost where the marquee is.
So you lost your tools. So if you go to the window menu and
yeah, it's behind something, but just a little nervous here.
Yeah.
So okay, so the marquee, I've taken all the walls that Eric and I have created through MasterTemplate and my own and put them over here and explained what they are. And it should have drawn it. If I used.
Oh, you drew a box. You didn't draw a marquee.
Yeah, I drew a slab.
Yeah.
So there's the slab I just drew. Anyway, so all the walls are laid out and lined up. It's a lot easier for me to go through this and pick the wall I want. I can look at them and know that that's drywall, that's siding. This one's got insulation. Instead of just siding, I know that there's different types of siding. So I don't have to guess at 2 or 3 shots. I can go in and pick the one I want by looking at it. And I've got a lot of foundation stuff preset. So it's just one of the things I did to make it more visual and easier for me to get in and around. So with my, and I'll try and
I'll point out something interesting here, if I may interrupt you for a moment, Roger. So we're very visual people. Certainly everyone involved in architecture is, but even as just normal, human beings in general, if you go to a restaurant and there's a lot of text describing the meal, well, sometimes it's very satisfying. You'll read all the descriptions that'll, say it's made with this sauce and, that sort of in garnish or this or that. But when you're tired, you go to certain restaurants and they have pictures and you just look at it and go, I'll have one of those, right? So the brain works on that basis, and just having a whole bunch of stuff nicely arrayed where you can pick visually is not only faster in many cases, but just sort of less stress on the brain. Yeah, go on and show us some more stuff here.
So every one of these pages is labeled, and then in my navigator, you can see there's the floor plan template right with the floor plan, or down here the section template with the sections. Same with elevations. So they're all spread out to where if I'm working in the floor plan, I can click on that template, grab stuff, and go back to the floor plan, put it in.
Go ahead and double click on this just to show us how you go back and forth relatively quickly.
Well, back and forth. I'll go to the electrical plan, and so this is on another screen. It's not here in the middle of my work area. I have 3 different monitors that I use. One has all my tool templates or palettes on it, and another one has PDF or stuff I'm copying or referencing or whatever on the third, and I use this one screen for a work area. So if I'm in here doing something and I need the electrical, I can go right to the template and there's the information. Some pages have a lot more information. It's because I work by myself and I don't have time, or I don't make the time to go in and clean all this up. And if I go back to turn everything on and get this out of here, you can see I've created these doors, and I've created them off of a page that I downloaded. Different people requesting different doors. So one afternoon I just made up all these, and I have the rolling track is in there for barn doors, different garage doors, and this should be a lot more detailed so I could just grab doors, but it's not. HVAC. So you can see even fills. Instead of trying to guess what the stone 9 is, there's a picture right there. So now I can just see the picture, go grab what I want, and use it how it's needed. And even in elevations over here, there's different roof materials. I can grab the one that fits this job and keep going a lot easier. You can see this tree's got some weird stuff going on. I don't take the time I should to clean all this up. I'm more into the production end of it than the maintenance and homework end. So I've got a lot of stairs that I can start with.
Let's just take a look at those stairs, just see the variation. So just do a marquee around that. And by the way, Kelly Morgan asked, how large is this file? So this would be, when you start out a project, you've got all these things in it. And how big is that file before you even start working on the project?
I'm up to about 350 megs by the time I'm done. So you can see this pile of stairs. Some of them came from MasterTemplate, which I bought and paid for, but it has, like Eric said, it's like learning a foreign language. And I didn't graduate high school, so I'm really tough on learning new things other than playing a video game all day and getting paid for it, and they call it ArchiCAD. This is fun for me. And, you know, the people say, I wish I could find a job that I can't wait to get back to. Well, this is it for me. I just love to get in there and create and work on all this stuff, and then call Eric and pester him with questions that I can't figure out.
Right.
So we've done a few things lately in the coaching call, and he's got the answers. I don't know where he gets them or where he's hiding them, but he always has the answer. So it's worth it for me to keep working and come back to the coaching call, and little tips. You might know what he's talking about and not think you need to learn anymore. And he'll come up with a tip that you forgot all about. So
thank you for the little endorsement there. For those of you who don't know,
well,
let me take my little 30 seconds commercial. You can get training programs through me, through Bobrow.com, and you can also be part of the coaching program where I answer questions from people like Roger, as well as newbies who are really just starting to get their arms around the program. But ultimately, the idea is, how can you take the best advantage of the power that's in here? And if you have any questions on it, just email me. By the way, Mark Wren says, are the doors and all the items in 2D, or are these in worksheets, or are they, let's see what else. So I'm sure the doors, you were showing elevations just for quick reference, but they are 3D doors. They are doors that basically they're door panels in that case. So Roger's using the standard door tool where you choose a custom panel, and the custom panels have all been installed into the library. So in order to create a custom door, just as a quick training tip, one way to do that is to draw what would be the door panel lying down on the ground like you see here, and then you save it as a door panel, and then you can choose it from the menu. Now it is in 3D. You can see, well, it looks like your all of those doors have the same.
That's the next step, is to save it as a door, a custom door. So all I did was get the panels made, and then if I do need that one, I'll go ahead and finish it off. These over here are ready to use, more so than these. And then you can see I've done a couple that I did use, but I'm at the point now where it's real quick to grab one of these panels and finish it off.
Okay, so you basically did a bunch of work all in one batch that was efficient to create these different door styles, but you haven't installed them all into the library yet. But if you need any of them in like 2 minutes, you can save it as a new door panel. And you just haven't taken that hour or two to just install all of them in. So
back to the time limitation thing.
Yeah, so Steve says, would an external link file work better for size and computer speed? If I'm working on his 50 property site, the system would slow down with this thing. Well, there's always going to be some adjustments you have to make to any system. I will give a couple of little procedural things. When you reference in an outside file, which we do in MasterTemplate, for example, we have a whole kit of parts that is hot linked in. The file size of the actual project does go up. All of the data is in the project, but it's centrally managed. That's the one advantage. That's one of a couple of main advantages of the approach that I use, is that if you update the template, the next time you open that project or any project or start a new project, it has been revised. You've got more stuff in it or refined things, but the size does not change if you are linking it in. Now, the other alternative, in addition, now Roger's living with the fact that these are off to the side, and whenever he wants to do a 3D view, he'll just marquee the building so that he avoids seeing all this stuff, right? Not a big deal. That's actually what Van Homan would do. He's the one who inspired that whole system for me years and years ago, is he would have the building off to the side, the kit of parts, and he would use the marquee to always focus on the current design. Now, the other approach that Tim Ball uses is to have this type of resource file in a separate file and simply switch to the other instance of ArchiCAD, copy things, and then paste them in to the working file. So that way the working file is just essentially the real project, the current project, and your template resource is in a separate file. It definitely has advantages in terms of file size, but you can't eyedrop when you do that directly because it's in another file. And also you have to make sure your attributes are synchronized. If you ever add a new surface or building material or anything it's up to you to coordinate between those. So those are some general observations. So Leslie Pink Morgan, hey Leslie. Leslie was our guest back in March, did some fantastic work, thank you. What would be the benefit or difference between having favorites set up versus these 3D like he's showing? So favorites in ArchiCADs since version 20 or 19 or whenever they added that are much easier to organize than they used to be. You have folders and hierarchies that you can do and you can see previews, but you're only seeing little mini previews as opposed to full-size things like that. And secondly, you can't actually copy a bunch of things. You know, if Roger wants to just have a bunch of things and bring them in, like show us your kitchen layout. I know you've been moving around. You had a number of different kitchen layouts there. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I delete the previous house, I'll pull out the kitchen and it's a hot link module, but here you can see I haven't got to the hot link step.
Yeah, so one of the advantages of having them visually arrayed is that he could literally grab a whole kitchen, put it in, and then move things around, as opposed to having to do each favorite one at a time. So there are trade-offs. Favorites are great, and they have some limitations. Peter Liang, hey Peter, with a custom door panel, does it stretch when the door is resized? So if you're making it graphically, like what Roger is doing, it will deform and stretch if you make the door wider. So, you know, for example, you make it from 2'6" to 3 feet here in the US or something like that, it will just stretch all the parts proportionately. Now, in many cases, that's just fine. And in some cases, that's not okay. You want to keep the side panels exactly the same width as everything else. So what you do there is you create more than one version, and each version is specific per size. Taryn says, that's a nice barn door. Okay. Todd says, how do you transfer favorites from a project to use it in a new project? So very quick little teaching tip. If you have the favorites palette open, there's a little pop-up in the upper right that allows you to do some management. One of them is export, and you can export either the whole set or just a few items that you know were added, and you save it out to a file, and in your other project, that same menu allows you to import. Now we are at the 45-minute mark, and I know we lost a few minutes at the beginning because of audio issues, and I've been talking a lot. What have we not seen, Roger, that you think would be a pity if we missed?
Duane's presentation.
Well, we're definitely not going to miss that. All right, you have furniture there. Okay, so
I've pretty much covered everything. It depends on the client as to what I'm doing. I design for the client. I'm not one of those guys that only designs a certain style. It's whatever they need and whatever they want. I can tell them if it's not quite correct or give them a suggestion on how to do it. But in the end, if that's what you want, then the county will approve it, and we'll do it that way.
Okay.
So, and then I don't spend a lot of time with people. I probably 2 or 3 hours most. I don't call out every faucet and paint colors. I try to get them to pick big things like stucco color or siding type or color. But in custom homes on a one-off residential like I do, they see something, their friend makes a suggestion, they make a change, the budget changes, the color changes. You can't get this item, it's not in stock, and that changes 4 or 5 other things. So I just get them a permit and a set of plans that the framer can use, and then let the general babysit them to pick out every single item based on their budget. And every contractor has different sources, and they have different materials at different prices. So I quit messing with all of that many years ago.
Okay, so that's clear on what your focus is, and I think that you've produced a lot of designs, a lot of homes that have been built. You're got your system dialed in. I'm gonna now, just before we switch to Duane, I'm gonna mention something that's happening because of Roger's generosity and because of my curiosity. So it's a combination. So when Roger mentioned things of, you know, in my template I have this, in my template I have that, it's, you know, I got to see this guy's template. All right, so we've all seen it at least up to a certain level of depth there. Now, what he's got there is not going to suit everybody. In fact, you know, there are people who do very different style of buildings that it would have very little to do with. But the idea, I think, is very valid, and that is that if you really collect the kits of parts that you use regularly and have them in quick access, it'll speed up your work. Now, when I create MasterTemplate and I update it each year, one of the things I do is I look for good ideas, and I ask for good ideas, and do try each year to add some more stuff to it that's useful. Hopefully doesn't clutter it up, but just adds more functionality. So Roger has agreed to allow me to go through his boneyard here, his junkyard of stuff, and pick and choose things. And I'm going to be adding in a bunch of stuff into MasterTemplate in the next few weeks as I analyze this. And I'm not quite sure exactly how it'll all play out, but this will be part of, you know, the expanded MasterTemplate. Now, I'm going to just say, any of you who have something, I wouldn't say similar, but let's just say something useful that you think other ArchiCAD users could benefit from, I would love to see your ideas, take a look at your files, and see if I can incorporate that into making, you know, MasterTemplate even better, even more wonderful, productive, effective, cool, all that stuff. And if any of you, like with Roger, you know, I'm giving him upgrades to MasterTemplate. In fact, I'm going to do, you know, the next few years of upgrades because this is a substantial contribution. So I'll just say I'm very interested, even if I can't fit it into, you know, this next few weeks. If you have anything that you'd like to share with the community, I will thank you, and I may, you know, give you free stuff in return, because this is really a win-win for everybody. So Roger, thank you for sharing this and for showing us some cool things, and you know, for your generosity and allowing me to pick and choose things. Now, one of the things I can't grab is anything that's commercial, anything that's sold by like CAD Image or other sources. Now, one of the people who in the early days was creating some things for sale is Duane Valencia, our next guest. So Duane, you want to put on your camera. I know you used to make some things that you, when you were teaching ArchiCAD, you would also sell. And so there are some things in here, and you've said, well, I don't know, I might allow some of them that I don't care about, that are useful, but you know, they're old, to go out in the world. So we'll see about that. But I'd like to see how your stuff in your projects, and you know, so let's switch gears.
I'm going to jump in here and just say, Roger, that was a wonderful trip down memory lane. There was one of the first things I did was teach this thing called Dynamite Construction Documents. And this system was part of what I taught. And in fact, it was honed when Orchid Winslow hired me to run front end stuff. I wasn't a draftsman or anything. I was just the ArchiCAD guy that was trying to create a system that they could use. And everybody jumped on board with this visual favorites kind of template thing. So.
Yeah, I remember the term ice fishing, because you would put it on a negative story. So just a little background. Before there was virtual trace or trace references, there was this concept called ghost stories. And basically it was the same idea, except it was only stories. So you could see you'd be on the upper story and you could see a ghost image of what was the story below. But you could create extra stories for certain special purposes that weren't part of the real building, but they were resources. Sometimes even 2D schedules and things like that would be put in there before they had whole dedicated schedule windows. But one of the things was a kit of parts, like a bunch of things, and then you could turn on the ghost story for that particular location and use the eyedropper. And because it would be grayed out, it would sort of look like it was underneath the ice, so ice fishing. So I remember hearing that from, forget the
Russ.
Was that Chuck maybe talking about it, or Russ
Yeah.
Sanders? Maybe? Yeah. All right, so let me switch over to Duane, make you the presenter. And again, Roger, thank you so much. Do stay on the line.
Yes, thank you, Roger.
Appreciate being here.
Yeah. And I'm looking at comments here. So good evening from Trinidad and Tobago, from Remrick. David Lohmeyer, from Roger's files, are the sketch plan elements 3D or just 2D? So sketch plan elements. I'm not sure what they were, but do you know what he's talking about, Roger?
No.
Okay. All right. So we'll have to find out a little bit more there, David. Steve says, I've been working with ArchiCAD for over 10 years and never really looked at graphic override. We found this is awesome for showing, for example, a floor joist layout or electrical in 3D. Okay, well, graphic overrides are really very, very powerful. They just were introduced about ArchiCAD 20, I think, and I've become more and more, not so much comfortable, but just seeing more and more ways that you can use it. It's very powerful. So, Duane, tell us about your work, your types of projects, and let's take a look at a couple of them.
Sure. So I've been doing ArchiCAD forever, like Eric mentioned. We won't go into the whole story about how we bought Architreon first, and that kind of fell through. But I've had the great honor of working with this since it was in its infancy, and I got to tell you, they were a very great company about listening to the users. And a lot of this stuff came out of an old original. Picture yourself, if you're old enough to remember AOL. Wednesdays afternoon at lunch, we got a band of merry men together. I'm sure there were some women there too, but we couldn't see each other. And we had the ArchiCAD Lunch and Learn chat on AOL. And they participated and were very interested in the comments that we were making. And here it is, I don't know, 25, 30 years later. And a lot of the stuff that we were asking for came to fruition. So what I do, I'm a custom residential architect here in California. Right now I'm doing a bunch of work for an architect in Scottsdale, Arizona. So he's the architect, I'm the ArchiCAD guy, but I'm responsible, like any project manager, for producing complete sets of plans. And it's been an awesome experience because he's very into taking advantage of everything that ArchiCAD has to offer. And we'll go through some of that today. So what I'm after is the complete architect in a box. And the box is one file. That's an ArchiCAD file. And you'll see in my things, I have the applications for building in my ArchiCAD file. For the design review, I have all the plans. I have all the consultant plans. And if I ever had a computer crash, I would know that I only need one file to recover everything. And working for this guy in Scottsdale, of course, we have plenty of backup solutions. We're doing everything in teamwork. So he's always got a current backup of what I'm working on. And so I'm nowhere near the quantity that Roger does. I'm stuck with about 3 houses a year. Mine happen to range from about 7,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet. And
budgets, construction budgets?
Yeah, well, that's the good thing. I'm not the architect, so I have no idea what the construction budgets are.
But you've mentioned multi-million-dollar.
They're big. I would label these high-end custom homes.
Okay, so can you show us some 3D?
Absolutely. So I had some thoughts when Roger was talking. So before I do that, I just wonder how many people know that's ice fishing. And so you kind of stole my thunder, Eric. But rather than putting everything on the plan, I would go down in my story and just, I have trace right now because I'm not using that right now, but I would do kit of parts as my lowest thing. When you go into your 3D exclusion palette, you can tell it not to ever show anything from the lowest story, or any story for that matter. So that will allow you to freely junk up that story. But whenever you wanted to, this is a trace reference showing right through the trace reference. I can pick up that car and put it on this story. Anyway, that was a small add-in to what Roger was talking about. So Roger also talked about those parts that I was like the section parts. Well, what I decided to do was, if I could do that in 2D, why wouldn't I want to do that in 3D? So I've essentially created some 3D framing parts. I've had some, and I worked on an algorithm.
Let's take a look at the whole project. Let's start architecturally, like, you know, front, back, you know, what's the project about? And then we can go into the, all right, you want to show us the framing of this project. All right, very cool. You've impressed me already.
All right, just pretend like you've seen a million houses. I'm sure all of you guys have. So they look much the same, and we'll get to some of that. But the essence was all that stuff that I was adding to every section in 2D. Why wouldn't I take advantage of it in 3D? So I'll be honest here. You know, this is evolving, obviously. I will tell you, each one of these is the same part. And just like the section where Roger showed you that, well, the bottom plate could be a double bottom plate, or it could be single bottom plate, or it could be a beam and a header. All that stuff is one part that just gets traced around the plan and distributed. And then I can make the choice on how I frame around windows, et cetera, et cetera. And so that just continued to evolve. I made a kit of parts.
This smart part, this is your own creation?
Yes.
And it basically, you place it, stretch it, and it automatically adds more framing?
Yeah. Right. And the nice thing is I can stretch it right here in the 3D window if I want. I only want half of that wall, and it's tidying everything up. I have blocking was a big deal. All the plan checkers wanted to see where the blocking was, so I got 2 lines of blocking that you can add into this. And then, like I say, everything is, so this, the width of this wall, then I can just stretch the width, same way as the height. So I can match whatever I've got going on in plan. Let's go down the story.
So you say it's one part that you array around. So you're not using an add-on, an API, some automation tool. You're
right. I tried that, Eric, and it would just never fail that even simple corners like this, I would get, I don't know, a foot extra framing out here.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Since I didn't create it, I didn't know how to fix it.
You're doing semi-automatic because each one of those parts has some settings, like it's 16 inches on center, it's this dimension, you know, do I want blocking, do I not, you know, et cetera. So,
exactly.
But you can very quickly, once you've got the basic shell, just drop these in, stretch them, and, you know, with a few little button pushes, change it to start the framing from the right side versus the left side, or
right, yeah. Yeah, there is a shift that just shifts all the studs X number of inches, so in case you have a very particular spot you want them to show up in.
Right, okay, excellent. So this part, does anyone else in the world have it, or is it yours alone and unique?
Just the guys that I work with.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna talk to you about if I can twist your arm. Anyway.
Eric, the manager. I get it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is very great. No, this doesn't add much weight to the project. I'll just point.
No, not at all. And so we were talking about a lot of create your own parts, and what I used to call slabify. You just put stuff together and call it a part. like the doors, which is a very good technique. I still use that. And you know, I could have done that with all these things, but so this one's actually scripted. If you guys know the difference between scripted and Slabify, this requires someone that knows a little bit about GDL, and honestly, the language isn't that tough. But it's so powerful because it allows me to do all the things we were just talking about, stretch it, put different on centers, and so I don't have to lay each one out. Anyway, not a big promotion on that tool, that piece. But why did I build it? Because I wanted to analyze how things were going together, and I wanted to stop putting individual 2D parts into sections. So that covered both those bases.
So Duane, before you move on, a couple of questions about what we're seeing on screen. So
Yes.
the top rows of your work environment, is that a custom toolbar? It looks like you've added more buttons up there.
Yeah, and it's tough when they change the next update, because now I got to decide if there's anything new that needs to go up there, if I want to. So yes, all custom.
All right, and then you have your main tools, you know, your wall tool, window tool and stuff, and then next to it there's this other thing. What is the other thing?
Yeah, so this is Enscape, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, time permitting. So that's an add-in visualization tool that works inside of ArchiCAD.
Enscape, Enscape.
Yes.
So, okay. All right. So the scripted. Will this provide a stud count?
It could. Absolutely it could. I don't use it that way, but it could, because here's the thing. I'm an architect, and when I start telling contractors how many studs are in the walls, then I become liable for a whole lot more than I'm getting paid for.
Right. Okay. Todd asks, why are you doing this? Who looks at this? Carpenters? Question mark.
So that's a good point, because and this enters into a lot of what I do. I don't do everything so that it shows up on a plan. I do things that I need to evaluate the building and make the best building I can. And for me, that requires knowing that I can get 8 trunks of HVAC through this little thing. Now, yes, I can draw a little section through there and draw 8 circles, and that will be fine. But when the guy's out in the field then says, how do I get AC over to this side? I can say, well, here's the graphic that I can send you. I can just do a screenshot and say, here's how I planned it. If, you know, do your best to make that happen. And if there's something that I missed that happened out in the field that I didn't know about, then we can adjust and make some kind of plan on how to attack that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. By the way, Steve Pribble, you may know Steve.
Hi, Steve. Yes, I know Steve.
How does that coordinate with composite structures? So I'm not sure if he's referring to composites or complex profiles, but basically, how does all your framing coordinate with the volumetric walls that ArchiCAD?
Well, so that's the semi-automatic part. It doesn't coordinate. It doesn't do anything automatically. I have to stretch them to the right width. I do have wall types that are composites. So this wall has stucco, plywood, air gap, and a finish on it. So it coordinates exactly where, I mean, I coordinate them exactly where they need to be, if that's the question. It's not extracted from my wall type.
Okay.
They're 2 parts put together.
Cool. So Wafa says, voice is not clear. The audio is clear to me, so Wafa, it may be your local internet connection. Hopefully the recording will be good. If anyone else wants to make a comment, how's the audio in general? I think it's been good so far.
Okay.
All right, let's take a look at some other stuff. Like, so, you know, what else?
So just to button this up, trusses. You have any current issue of ArchiCAD? Those trusses were originally a kit of parts that were similar to this stud bay. Graphsoft ended up liking them and then stuck them in their plans, and then they did better ones. So for whatever that's worth. And I've since, I don't let them go either. Instead of just one truss, now I have a whole hip set that allows me to, in one chunk, truss this whole end of a house. And in my way of thinking, if I did like a half hip, then I just put two of them back to back and I would get a whole hip, if that makes sense. So it ends in a flat truss instead of a hip section, but I would just mirror it like I've probably done here.
You're actually putting in a system of trusses for a particular width of a bay?
Right, so this is two pieces to make a hip on both sides, and it just the length, the total length and the total width is all it needs to know. Well, and how high is the heel, but that's stuff you type in the inside. How high is the heel? What's the pitch? What are all the member sizes? And then it gives you that.
Okay, and is that scripted then, so it will?
Yes, absolutely. So that's stretchy, and like if I wanted, those need to be 2x6 top chords. Member dimensions. Sorry, my top chord is 2x6. Then that adjusts everything to make a 2x6 top chord.
Okay, excellent. So what else do you think is unusual or interesting about the way you use ArchiCAD?
So since I did that, the goal was just to get sort of an outline of a truss. I wasn't trying to be a truss engineer. And then you give them an inch and they want 2 inches. Well, we can't see all the trusses in there. So rather than make an extremely complex algorithm, I decided just to use custom profiles as a truss. So this is truss D1A, and you can see all my trusses are profile. Well, a lot of my trusses are profiles, they're not all. And so what's the benefit of that? If you can see through the screen, there you can see a little hop in the bottom chord. You can see a pitch coming down, and I sketched in a most likely webbing scenario, even though I know it's not how it's going to end up. But what it does give me is something in section that will help me analyze, if I need a 20-inch trunk line going through there, do I have a spot for that, or am I going to have to tell them to do something special?
Okay. So those are all custom profiles that you're just extruding like 1.5 inches or 3.5 inches, or
right. So the wall is, it's on the other side, but you're right. It's an 1.5 inch wall or a beam, and that pushes it out 18 feet of truss.
Right. Okay. So just to make clear, because I know some people won't quite get what you're saying and what I'm saying. So normally when you create a wall, you're specifying a series of skins, so much cladding, so much framing, interior cladding, etc. And then you run the wall 5 feet, 50 feet, 10 meters, 30 meters, whatever you're running the wall. When you create a custom profile, you maybe add some molding or some framing or some other things, and you're still running it a substantial distance along the axis line of the wall. In this case, the shape is actually the profile, that whole long, complex series of, angled pieces. And instead of it running many feet or meters along, it's running just the thickness of the framing. So a 2x6, it would go 5.5 inches deep. That's the little blue line that he's highlighting there. So the profile could be, if you were to extend that, you could make this a tube that had that shape. It wouldn't make any sense, but yeah, just that's the profile, and he's only doing it just the thickness of the framing members. All right. And you have how many roughly of those sort of presets in your project? It looks like there's quite a few.
It was a ton. And so I'm very particular when this changes, like the bearing changes, or this is essentially the same truss, but there's a notch in the outside wall. So that's a new truss. And then I needed to turn the corner for a hip, so that's a new truss.
So in your template, about how many of those do you have?
Well, so these are not templatized. They wouldn't make any sense. So how do I come about those? Is I'll jump into a section and I'll see what my void is. I can draw right there in the section fill pattern that is what I want, bring it into the profile manager and make it a truss. So it's custom part for each project.
All right, so you're basically cutting a section saying, hey, I need support here. You're drawing it just like you might in 2D to say, here's the shape that I want. You're doing it with the fill tool, or you draw with lines and then you create a fill from that. Now that fill, which looks okay in section, is purely 2D. You copy and paste it into the profile manager, and it instantly creates a 3D, an element that can be used in 3D. So, and so you don't start out your template with a whole bunch of these. You just create them in the project as you need them. Okay, excellent.
Right. And then I should mention, they're pretty easy to change if the architect wants another foot in that room. I don't have to go through that process all over again. I just take the change and make it to the profile.
Right. Okay. So that's one of the other advantages of profiles is that you they are linked back to the source. So if the design change, you change it once in the source profile, and then all the instances that you've placed, of course, will update.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Let's hit some other stuff. You talked about graphic overrides. I'm a huge fan. I think I was skeptical, although I've been asking for it forever, in terms of how AutoCAD used to allow layers to be hidden or changed just in the layer palette. So what they did was they made it even better than I thought they were. Let me see, what do I got here? So one of the things I was asked to do was to explain to the contractor and his sub where the stone occurred on this project. So I designed a graphic override that said, tell me every wall that has the material stone on it and paint it red and make everything else black. So I don't have to make any kind of special adjustments to the objects themselves. I just do it in the graphic override. And then I can keep following that through. So the elevation said, take all the stone and make that full intensity and then gray everything else back. I did some additional overlays over that, but that was the essence of the graphic override.
Okay, let's look at the graphic override rule. This is one of the things that I think I love to do in these sessions, is to see an application and then say, how did you get there, so that people, at least in general, can learn. So if you can just go to the graphic override rule that you use.
I will. This happens to be a PDF and it's a different project, so I'll show you one. But I want to show you that it also gets through to the 3D window, and so now all my colors mean something different, and I can, without me having to do much extra work, I can show this graphic to the contractor, and he gets a better idea of when he's doing his takeoff. Oh, I didn't realize that was stone. So now I can go back and take a look and see what that means.
Excellent.
Now there's just some rudimentary kind of everyday stuff.
Let's go to that graphic override before you do it.
I'm going to, well, that's actually a different one. I can't open up that file.
Oh, you don't have a graphic override in this file, okay.
Well, so right, again, these are custom too. I don't need to show stone on every project. So let's just do something that everybody's gonna do, electrical plan. And then I'll open up this graphic override. So what I've told this graphic override to do is take everything on my layer that starts with E and don't do anything to it. Actually, there's two ways to do it. You can isolate what you want and make something happen to it, or you can isolate everything else and do something to that. Sorry, hard to see. I used to do overlays. I think you and Van were talking about that, where we would do the walls as one overlay and then the electrical as a different overlay. And then what that always happened was you'd go back to the electrical plan and there wouldn't be any walls there. So we'd have a hard time managing that plan. Anyway, so now I've told this one, let me just open up the source view. And the nice thing is, if you get it right, every time you use your source view, you'll see exactly what you want to see. So if this comes through, you can see these are full intensity and these are thin and gray, everything else. So let's take a look at my little electrical thing. So there were some stock ones that I could use, turn all the fills off, and then some that I built. So without going into a lot of detail, I can tell it to gray everything and then come back and highlight the electrical stuff.
All right, let's just look at gray all, just the rule. Click on it and say edit rule, or click the little thing there.
Yeah. So that's a simple one. I don't even have to tell it what to look at. I just say change everything to a pen number 2, which in my pen scheme is that color gray. And that's all that one does.
Can you just change that for test purposes to a different color, like a light blue or something like that?
Let's go red. Come on.
Like that. Let's actually do the aqua color. Well, all right, so red. All right, so basically what Duane's doing is nothing has changed about the design. Nothing has changed about the elements. All he's doing is saying, just color everything a certain way. Now, the things that didn't get colored, let's look at your setting there. Those are the elements that meet the next criteria up, the one that's at the top, which is the last one done. So it does it in order from bottom to top.
Right.
And that is?
So that says, find everything on a layer that starts with E, and I happen to have a lighting consultant, and all their layers start with LC. So find all those things and paint them pen 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I could do anything. I'd change the line type to squiggly if I wanted to. I don't, but I could. So I guess if we want to flush this out the same way, let's make all those blue. And so now I have a blue and red blend.
Right. So so that's the power of graphic overrides, is that you can use it for presentation. In other words, like, hey, here's a drawing. We just want to be very clear. You can use it for study. For auditing purposes, so you can say, I want to see things that haven't been classified or are, objects that are on this layer. I mean, there's all sorts of criteria that you can use to just bring visually some information to your attention. So,
right. And it's really been able to allow me to. This was too involved, maybe, but for example, if you wanted to do a color site plan, you could use a graphic overlay to allow you to do a color site plan, but then on the next paper, turn off all those colors and just have a black and white site plan, right? Without changing any layers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's some questions here. Let me just see. Yep. Jay Garbarino says, would you also add webs to the truss profile if you like? Absolutely.
The more information, the better.
Okay. Grant says, hi, Duane, do you charge the contractor for highlighting the stone walls as an example?
Well, yes. In fact, that time we did because they asked for it specifically.
Okay. So Jay says, is the electrical graphic override in place of using pen sets? How is it better?
Well, so the problem with pen set, what I should do is turn off all overrides and then show you that this is what it would look like on Natural. And even the zones have a color on them that means something to me. So this would be a garbage plan in terms of pens and stuff. And when I'm looking at a floor plan, I like my wall outlines to look darker than, say, sink or whatever. But when I want to gray that all back, I don't want to have to recreate a pen set that switches all that stuff. I can do it much easier with graphic override.
Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, and I'm sorry, my throat's, excuse me. The pen sets are very specific because they're basically, this pen is this color, this pen is that color. And you might draw with a bunch of different pens, certain types of elements. There are different things in library parts. You use multiple pens. And you would literally, well, in some cases, have to do a lot of fine tuning of a lot of individual pens to get an effect. Here, we're doing a very quick criteria. If it's on a layer that starts with E, do something. So pen sets are great in many ways, and I use it, for example, in a 3D view. I will just say, make all of the normal construction pen lines black, so that in 3D, the edge lines are nice and crisp. They're not red and blue and this and that there. Now, I could do it with a graphic override, but the pen set is easy enough to do. But this sort of thing of just having a flight of fancy or just a requirement, hey, can you highlight this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get asked that a lot. And it's like I said on the stone thing, I can see it in plan, I can see it in 3D, I can see it in elevation just by using. In fact, that was probably the same override for all those different plans.
Yeah. Now, Dan asked, does Wayne work on a percentage basis or hourly? Does efficiency pay dividends?
I work hourly for this guy, and I haven't heard any complaints, so I'm going to guess we're good.
All right. So actually, he gains from your efficiency then.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Right.
Okay. And so he gains, and well, you don't have to work quite so hard to meet certain deadlines. And I assume you can probably charge a higher hourly rate than some people who are less efficient, right?
There you go. There you go.
You're the expert. All right. Raul says, any sub-consultants using what software? Any coordination?
Yes, plenty of sub-consultants, civil, structural, landscape, lighting, HVAC, plumbing. The coordination is most typically just base plans sent out to them. So that would bring up my next topic. And I just hope everyone knows the power of Publisher. And Publisher for me is not just a way to print PDFs, but it's also a way to give consistent base plans to my consultants. So quick run through the Publisher set. I have 3D export because we also use better renderers than me. So I've got some ways to ship stuff out to those guys in SketchUp or 3ds format or whatever. And a couple other ones, but one of them is base plans. And so this little folder is linked to a piece on my hard drive. And anytime I want, I can come here and click base plans and say publish, and I can publish a new set of DWGs for everything that I give base plans for. So I got site design plan, which just has a little bit less information than the floor plan, got a little more stuff in it. Ceiling plan, roof plan. I do, by the way, have props for Lou Bishop for naming the stories that aren't really plans as interstitial. I didn't hear that word before, well, when I first met Lou 25 years ago or more. Anyway, so a clear story plan is a plan that used to be an interstitial plan that now is a plan that I produce on my set because there's always some windows on there and I need to show them. Anyway, the point was I can set up all these bases with the proper.
Can you just double click on each one of them? Just
yeah, I'm going through that right now. Here's the site. So the point is, every time I send this to the site people, they're getting the same environment, even though my plan, obviously I would only do it when it changes, but all the same layers, all the same, if I have an override, all the same overrides, which says, don't show me all your fancy fills from your site plan, turn all that stuff off, because this is a base plan. And what I've schemed, just here's a little tech tip number 6, is I allow myself to rename this folder with a date. And I use the special naming that says, if I need to produce something today, which I did, that all these will be renamed automatically. Let's say I wanted to do this tomorrow. So now these are all going to change the 21st. So now it's just so much easier for me to track.
Where's the magic done there?
That'll cost you, Eric. No, I'm just kidding. So when you do your name items, rename item, you can put in hot text here. It's like auto text anywhere else. And so that's source ID and source name. So because my source ID comes from the folder, then by changing the date in the folder, I change all the dates on the files themselves.
Okay, so then you have a suffix, which would be design plan, floor plan, or ceiling main. Those
Right.
are put in after that thing. So when you change the folder name, all of those change. So now you're exporting, in this case, what, a bunch of, is that DWG?
DWGs, and they've got the proper DWG translator for the site. I don't think I did in this case, but it might have civil units instead of architectural units, and whatever other little changes need to happen between the different people that get these. They've already been made, and they sit over here, and I just hit this and say publish, and it'll give me a whole new set.
Okay. So just for those of you who are less familiar with all of ArchiCAD's environment, Duane, can you just click on project map, view map, etc. Just so people, or show organizer, yeah, that's good. So going back to some basics, but it'll help those of you who are less familiar. The project map is different parts of the project that could be viewed in different ways. And I'm sure some of you are going to go, oh, does he have to explain this? But believe me, I know there's confusion here. So you go to the next one, which is the view map. The view map basically are those same viewpoints, but with certain context, like which layers are on, what scale, and maybe graphic overrides, things like that. Each time you double click on a view, you have a predictable way of looking at your project. Of course, we know about layouts where we put views on the sheets, but then the publisher is not as well used, not as often known about, and that is a way to basically compile either views or layouts and with particular settings, and then potentially export or print or plot or even upload a bunch of information in the same way every time. So every time you want to send to the structural consultant a bunch of drawings, you can publish those ones. So that's.
And this is my current publisher for submitting plans. So this creates those and puts them back on my folder. And again, all date engaged, so I don't have to worry about, I don't reset my publisher criteria. It just points to the project folder. Everything else is based on where it sits in this tree.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we had at least to clarify, because I'm sure that some percentage of the people watching didn't know what the heck you were talking about there. So publishing is just an organized way of getting the information from your computer to others who might need it through PDF, DWG, printing, or plotting would be the most common things.
Right. Okay.
So there was a question about your closet and just the little line work that indicates hanging clothes. Is that a line type, or what is that?
So that's actually, so I've been through many of these, and this is actually ArchiCAD's wardrobe, and it just allows you, that's one of the display options.
Okay, so it's actually an object in the library that has an option to show hanging clothes like that.
Right. Right.
All right. What else? I'm gonna try to remember what you wrote, Duane, when you
I got a ton of stuff if you want to just.
Yeah, come on. What else do you got? You know, we got time. We got half an hour left.
So I think, I'm not sure where it was, but you mentioned clones at one point in time. I'm a big supporter of clones.
Clone folders.
Clone folders, yeah. So you'll know anything with a little arrow on it is a clone folder. And here's what I like. I'm just going to give you the headline. And the headline is, if you clone details, for example, then anytime I create a detail, I already have a view created, and I don't have to recreate it. And for me, that's a big deal, because I'll do 20 details, and then I'll notice on my plans, I only have 12 of them on my plans when I didn't create views for them before, because I would do them and forget them. So now, details come up in clones. One myth about clones is that they're all stuck in the same output, but they're not. I can go into each instance in a clone. Here's one of the details. if I just show properties. So that's, I can do whatever I want here. I need to give it a different layer set, a different scale, all those things that we talked about before. And as I go down, you'll see this one's in a different, got something different about it. So I'm not, clone doesn't mean everything exactly the same.
So let's stop for a moment here. So how do you create a clone folder? Because this is a question Steve Beverly says. So what is a clone folder?
All right.
When you're creating a folder in the view map, you can create it either two types. One is a empty container that you can put anything in, and the other is a shortcut reference to a particular part of your project map. So that little button that Duane just hovered over has a little tiny arrow. It also would be an alias in the, on Mac things. It is a shortcut in some terminologies. It points to something. So point it to sections. I like sections, just because
sections and elevations for sure. And here's the nice thing is when you're doing this, you say for 90% of the time, I'm going to want section layers. I'm going to want them at 3/16. So I'm going to do the entire model. I can give it a base recipe to follow. And so anytime a new section is created in plan, it will have this recipe. And then I'm free to come back later and say, oh, this is a different section. I need that particular section to show up at a quarter scale, whatever.
Yeah. So the power is it's easy and quick. It's systematic in that it all of the elements or all of the views have similar starting point. So it's automated and consistent, and yet it still gives you the flexibility to say this particular view is different. So detail drawings, let's say that most of them are at 1 inch to a foot or something like that, but some of them are at 3 inches to a foot, or some of them are other scales. Right. So it starts out with a standard, and then each individual view can be somewhat different.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm not sure if that answered the exact question we were after.
Dan Wyckoff says, are you modeling details or using 2D? So details, talk about details.
Right. I would say 70% modeled. There's some stuff that I want. Let me try to get a cheesy.
Yeah, let's take a look at 2 or 3 details and talk about what came from 3D and what didn't.
All right, fair enough. That's probably a better way to do it. Let's go. Roof is always fun. And by the way, I use this map a lot just to get from here to there. As of course, layouts, this was obvious, but for views also. Let's go over details. And as you can tell, I'm not a great multitasker. I can't think and navigate at the same time. Oh.
All right, so we're looking at a roof detail.
It's refreshing, so. Everything is live link. So for example, obviously that's 3D. So I made this in 3D. I took the view and made it a detail, but then I also added a 3D version of it just so they could kind of see what I'm talking around the corner. This, again, here's my truss, 3D truss in action. All right, since we're going to go in here, let's open that. Okay, details, so everything's busted in the line. But we talked about profiles before. This eave, all the way up to the drip edge that Roger was talking about, is part of a profile. And that's strung along the length of all my roof eaves. Using the stretchy version, I can tell, for example, this dimension to always be the same, but when my eaves get bigger, add it to this dimension. So I can cover a lot of ground without having to create multiple.
Can you show a trace reference of the section that's the source?
I don't know. Can I?
Well, if you turn on trace reference, and then you can choose the reference, and there'll usually be the source if there is one, if this came from a section?
Yeah, it must have. So I'd have to find the section and find out where the bubble is. So unfortunately, this happens everywhere, so I have no idea where that started from. But what I can do, I'll tell you what I can do is just, let me just do a little snippet of that, of any roof. It's the same idea. So yes, all this would be live in the section. I don't do a whole lot, and maybe we can go there later, but so here's that piece. Here's that piece. And this one got a little tricky because there are some areas where I have a patio overhang. I didn't want to really make the thing go all the way in, so I just added a piece of ceiling in there to make that happen. But that's the object, and it's got all the different materials and all the different little pieces on it. I could have, if I wanted to, added that 2x cross section in there. I didn't, and then I wouldn't have had to draw anything in that detail. Next time.
Okay, so in terms of details, how do you carry across details from one project to another?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just take a look at some standard stuff. Window door details, for example. Because as much as I love 3D modeling, I am not going to 3D model cross sections of window frames. So the little block stuff that ArchiCAD has is fine. I can make it the same dimension that I want. I just don't. So these details are circa 2012, 2010, and they've just been carted from project to project since then.
So how do you store them and access them? Are they in a detailed library file or what?
Yeah. There's a separate file that's for detailing. And just detail retrieval, I should say. I don't really do anything in that file. And lately, it's just been easier to go, you know what, last project had all these, I'll just go there and suck them all in. It's the same principle, two files open at the same time.
So so that detail reference library, are those placed on in separate detail windows, or are they placed on?
Absolutely, yes. And at one point in time, I was really energetic, thinking anyways, that I could use that file to print me a book of all the different detail instances. And there would be a little number down here that said, this is window or whatever this is, the door 505.6. And then I could print out an 8.5 by 11 book. And then if the architect was governing which detail got chosen, he could flip through the book and say, this is the details I need for this project.
So you were going to do it and you never quite did it?
Well, I started it, but it just, things change too fast. And you're working in a file and making a bunch of changes, and that's hard to get back to that other file to make all the necessary changes.
Right, okay. As a question, do you appreciate the new MEP standard with 24, given the amount of modeling that you're already doing?
So I wasn't wanting to talk about MEP, only because I've tried it and it just seems convoluted. I have not tried the 24 stuff. I am anxious to do it because, I can stick in a cylinder in an elbow almost as fast as I could have done MEP in the past. But I think what they've got now is something much different and much more user-friendly. So I'm anxious to get in there and try it.
Okay, so to be determined, right?
To be determined. So I'm gonna, if we're into PSAs.
So any sub-consultants using BIM or working in 3D?
Well, my renderer. Other than that, every now and then the landscape will come up with a 3D view of what they're doing. I have no idea if it's just sketch or if it couldn't be derived from any of my 3D stuff because they don't get anything 3D, just 2D stuff. So I guess I'd have to say not really.
So you don't actually supply your 3D model to your consultants?
No, it's available. In fact, this whole Enscape thing and previously BIMX was a big boon to send to my structural engineer. And yes, I would send them my version of the framing, and so they could look at it and make some kind of.
But right now they're not working in 3D like Graphisoft's.
Well, they're
It's possible.
no, not for their typical stuff. If they need to study a steel frame, yeah, I'm sure they put that in 3D and load it up and then get all the connections and stuff they need. But as a visualization tool, no.
Okay. Now you mentioned Enscape a few times, and are you in a position where you can just show us this?
Yeah, so this is actually a different project than the one I was just showing you, but it seemed to work. So, so this is ArchiCAD, but it's Enscape overlay. And so if I were going to jump, that's what we see in ArchiCAD. You guys are all familiar with this. Yeah, beautiful. All right, so let's go to Enscape. And there's just a whole different notch here. I will say the way I use it, I am not as good as the renderers that we hire, but here's the beauty. Well, there's several beauties. One is that every change I make in ArchiCAD will be reflected in Enscape on the fly. And I don't know if you guys use CineRender, whatever is built into ArchiCAD. You know, if I wanted to render that view, I might be here an hour. But if I want to render this, I'm just going to tell this to go Enscape, save, and it'll bring up a little progress bar, I hope. Here it is. Hey, let's render.
So just a little context. Enscape is one of a growing number of resource tools that do high quality rendering using graphic cards. So in other words, your computer main work it's following along is called the central processing unit or CPU, and they get faster and better and more cores all the time over the years. But the graphic controls, the things you see on screen, are handled by the graphic card, the GPU, graphic processing unit. And those have now been harnessed more and more to get this type of rendering from complex models. Now, Enscape is PC only. And it is, how much is it? It's something you have to buy, right?
Yeah, it's a subscription based, about $600 a year.
Okay, so a modest cost for that. Now,
yeah.
You can compare it in terms of the quality to, you know, what?
Twinmotion.
Well, BIM, it's much higher quality than BIMmotion, but in terms of Twinmotion. So Twinmotion is, I'm going to say, roughly similar quality. And what are the advantages and disadvantages? Well, Twinmotion right now
is a paradigm shift. Twinmotion really is its own program. So you would, in here, they have what they call a direct link, and you get your 3D window, you save a direct link out. If you've ever worked with Atlantis before, it's very similar. Save out that kind of file. When you call it up in Twinmotion, you can add trees and furniture and people and wind and fire and all that kind of stuff. And then when you continue editing your ArchiCAD file, you'll redo that, and it will just suck the new stuff in from ArchiCAD into your Twinmotion. So all those trees that you placed are still there. If you change the materials, for example, if Twinmotion has a better stucco, you can edit that, and all those relationships will still remain as long as you name the material the same, which you would. So it's fairly fluid. So the benefit of that is it's a separate program. If I want to quit ArchiCAD and work in Twinmotion, I can do that. Enscape, on the other hand, is live reading from the 3D window in ArchiCAD. So I need ArchiCAD open in order to do my Enscape work. In fact, most of my work, even if I wanted to add, for example, this is what they call assets, trees, furniture, whatever, people. Well, let's say I wanted to add a person. I do that in the ArchiCAD window. So we have to add Mr. COVID-19. He gets placed, oh yeah, fine. Sorry, one of the downsides of teamwork is I have to own the library in order for me to do that. Maybe this is more than you wanted to know. So Enscape assets, reserve. Okay. Booyah, booyah. Anyways, all the creation gets done in ArchiCAD and then it's manifested in 3D. So one of the things you'll also notice difference is that Twinmotion does not use proxies, to my knowledge. So you're going to see everything as it should be. Enscape, however, uses proxies. So when I stick an Enscape object into an ArchiCAD 3D window, like I just did, it's a placeholder, essentially. So it's not going to look like you want it in ArchiCAD. And this is taking longer than I think we should.
Okay, so Enscape certainly worth checking out. You know, I think Graphisoft has made the arrangements with Epic Games to be able to give away Twinmotion licenses for the next year and a bit. I did see an interesting thing that's happening. You know, Apple has some really strict rules for developers. You know, if you have an app on the Apple Store, you know, for iOS or for Mac for certain applications, then basically you have to sell it through Apple, and they take something like 30%, I don't know, of it, and you can't sell subscriptions or other add-ons independently of Apple. So Apple basically says, if you want to be in our world, you have to pay our, you know, pay for our thing. Now, Epic with Fortnite or some game like that basically was bypassing that, and Apple just called them on it recently and said, you have a certain, like 2 weeks or some limited period of time to take that off, otherwise you're going to be kicked out of the App Store. So Epic, which is a huge gaming company and doesn't need Apple per se, is being told by Apple, you play by our rules or you're out. And Epic makes Twinmotion. So we have a little bit of a dicey thing. I saw this on, what is it, that portal that's on Mac, Mac, there's a portal that focuses on Mac, Architosh, that's right, Architosh.
Oh, okay.
Reporting on this saying, you know what, this is actually a little bit scary, because if you're a Mac enthusiast, we may not have Twinmotion next year because Epic might just say, you know, Apple, you know, we're not going to play by your rules. Now, of course, Enscape is PC only, and I think one of the things you said, Duane, is that you know, maybe part of the reason they are PC only is because they didn't want to play by Apple's rules, and so we shall see it. So the world is complicated.
Yeah.
I love the quality of the images. You know, it definitely, you know, has.
Yeah, this one's somewhat early in the process. What it allows me to do, actually, let me show you in this way. Do I have it open already? And you just let me know when we're running out of time.
Yeah.
What it allows me to do is, so this is my renderer. So they got a lot better planting. This would, honestly, it would choke my system trying to do this many plants in a 3D view.
Mm-hmm.
So those three are done by an outside renderer. And then what it allows me to do is spin around and show the client a lot more of what the design means in kind of full color. And so here's what I want you to know about Enscape is it will produce a standalone file that's just like the one I was showing you, where you could send that to someone and they can navigate through it on their own. And it also has a web-based version where I could export that to a web location, send them the link to that location, and they could view it in a browser.
Yeah.
So it's pretty rich that way. Of course, the browser version is not as robust. I don't think it does stuff like the fancy grass and the trees blowing and all that stuff. But anyway, so this allows me to set up several views. The nice thing about Enscape, they also have this in Twinmotion, is that whatever views, going back to my view map over here, I set up some 3D views, and Enscape has this little view tracker that anytime I change my view in the ArchiCAD 3D window, it will update in Enscape to the exact same view. So you get those all set up. I can reproduce those renderings, images, week by week in exactly the same viewport with the same sun, with the same all the other settings that are going into that. So, and Twinmotion has something very similar, but inside their own environment, you can set up views.
Right. Okay. Yes, I see a variety of comments, just people asking about how to compare Enscape and Twinmotion and things like that. All right, so here's a totally different type of question. David Lohmeyer says, how do you start a project, meaning the concept design phases? So, you know, tell us a little bit about when a project comes to you, how much is defined versus just starting from a site. You know, how do you get started?
That one. So while we're talking about that, I'm going to also talk about worksheets because these have been a big boon for me as well. And so you can see my architect's name is Dale. And I have Dale sketch A1, A2, A3, blah, blah, blah. So each time he came up with a new plan, I bring it into a worksheet. And so it's just a PDF. He does his work by hand and scans it. He has a large scanner at his place, and he sends it to me, and it looks like something like this, fairly decently drafted in a sketch mode. And so what I can do is if I place that exactly, let me get rid of that. If I place that exactly where my plan is, I can do a direct trace reference using that. So for example, let's just do, show me the main level. I have no idea what layers are on. So hard to see. Reference we'll make, say, blue. And active we'll make, say, red. So you can see the red stuff is his plan and my plan in blue. In case you didn't know, there's a little flip between reference and the active view. So now I can jump right to my plan and that reference will be behind it. And in this particular instance, it's now all the colors and a black background. So that's how I live. Then I just start my tracing effort.
Sorry, I was looking at some comments, so I missed it. What program was the original concept done in?
It's a hand sketch, scanned and made a PDF.
Okay, so you have a hand sketch that's done carefully to scale.
Yeah.
And then when you bring it in, you just need to make sure it's scaled. And then you synchronize it, you move it into the right position for your CAD environment in terms of, you know, a known point.
Typically, I'll have the civil existing topo just to land me to make sure I'm working in the right space, and then I'll overlay his drawing into the right space for that, and then go to town. Sometimes, most of the time, we end up doing the topo work before I ever get the design work, because he wants a base topo to work from and look at.
So you're modeling all the terrain. Now there's a question about mountains and valleys and things like that. How far out do you take it?
Okay, so three technologies, I should say. When we were looking at Enscape, I just got turned on to this technology, which is ancient as long as we've been doing this, but that is, Duane went to Google Earth, sat on the lot and did a 360 template and, you know, screenshotted the whole 360 template and mapped that to the inside of a cylinder which you'll probably be able to see the limit to. I'm sorry. That's the problem with somewhere down there is the bottom of the cylinder. Okay, so that's one technology. And you do these things because
zoom
you
out
have
further so we can see the top of the cylinder.
This is alpha channeled. So the sky is given to me by Enscape, and I cut everything to the top of the mountains just using magnetic lasso in Photoshop. So it's fairly easy and quick. And so it lets my sky come through, because that was one of the problems before, is there would be a top to the cylinder, and then you'd be in trouble.
Brilliant. Okay, so using alpha channel. Let me just explain, because this is going to be beyond a lot of people's comprehension, but I can explain it pretty quickly. If you've ever seen a cutout of a movie star at a video store, going back to the old days when you would go into a video store, right? Basically, you've got a picture and it's cut out, all right? Well, digitally, of course, you have the equivalent where you have something and it's cut out and, you know, placed in front of things. We've seen that on all sorts of TV graphics and things like that. Well, basically, the image file is always rectangular. It's always rectangular, just because that's the way the computers deal with it. But you can define that certain parts of that area are transparent or partially transparent. You can see through the foliage or things like that. So the alpha channel determines what is opaque and what's not. So it's just part of any photo editing tool that you can essentially say that this area right here, you can see the black area there, that's been defined as transparent. And so then by making the picture that would normally be just a hard edge, you know, something with a top edge, and actually be cut out around the mountains, now the other graphic, that is the sky, shows through. So it gives you, of course, a pretty natural feeling. And that was done with Google Earth. So actually, you know, something that, in this case, you have the luxury that the site was empty.
Yes. Well, okay. So let me, for those of you that know Google Earth, you can turn off buildings and it will give you pure landform. So that's the way I avoid seeing all those little cotton ball trees in Google Earth.
So in Google Earth, you can basically turn off the layer and it will give you something that it's calculated as a reasonable representation of the land.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So we have then a cylinder, which you in ArchiCAD, you basically created a custom surface, which is based on a texture file, which is based on a graphic image. And that surface is actually then wrapped around a curved wall. You can take, in ArchiCAD, you can create a wall that's curved. You can create a big wall that's like a screen that's curved, and you can then put that surface on it. And then you actually have to adjust the starting point so that the peak of the mountain is in the right.
Exactly.
Right.
I was able to tell because in Google Earth they have a little burp here of yellow, and I knew where that was, so that allowed me to put it in the right place. You mentioned wall. Yeah, wall can't go 360, so there's a little hole there. I could have done it.
Can you select that wall? Can you just select it and highlight it?
Yeah. Not in here.
Oh, you're in Enscape, right?
Yeah, I was in Enscape. You're right. Yes. So it's a wall. I think I would do slab next time because I can make that full 360. I can't do an object because I can't texture map to a specific location on an object.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So the other was the ones we were looking at before, which was Duane went to USGS and did like 20-foot contours for about 4 or 5 miles of mountains. That was an exercise, and you're welcome because I get to try all this stuff, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Anyways, where was I looking? Sorry, right.
There's a question: how much of this work is chargeable?
It's just, it's not directly identifiable as a line item charge, but I think we have to get out of that idea that every moment of my time is chargeable. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to not agree with that, and that's fine. But is the time I look on 3D Warehouse for objects, is that chargeable? No, but look, I got objects I can use. And now you know, 3 projects down the line, I've used it so many times that investment is minimal.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, there's a tip from Jim Schlegel, Cyclorama by David Nicholson Cole.
Yeah, good old David Nicholson Cole.
Yeah.
Okay, good tip.
Yeah, so by the way, David Nicholson Cole, one of the also original ArchiCAD experts, although focused on a specialty area of GDL programming, at least that's what I know him about. So he created a lot of custom parts to do various things, smart parts. So apparently he's created something that is this cyclorama, which if you've ever worked in theater and you've heard about the cyc and putting lighting on a cyc, that's what the term comes from. It's basically a backdrop that could be curved in this case. Kevin Cabral says, how do we use Google Earth to create a mesh of the landscape? I know we used to have a direct Google Earth connection, but I don't think you have to do it through KML, like exporting to SketchUp format.
Well, so technically you have to do it through SketchUp Pro, because the regular SketchUp won't do it. But if you go to SketchUp and go geolocate, and then it'll bring you to Google Earth at the location that you specify, you can, you know, section off however big their biggest section is and bring it back into SketchUp, tell it to elevate, and it's not called elevate, but it's something like that that gives it the 3D-ness. And then, so you can do that, you know, 20 times in one SketchUp file by moving your little patch to a neighboring location, and you can build, and I've done that, that was the third way. You can build a mesh. Once you come out of SketchUp, it'll act as all one mesh when you load it into ArchiCAD, because at that point it's an object.
Okay, so you're using a combination of Google Earth's data, SketchUp's ability to connect up directly with it and create a landform, and then its ability to be read by ArchiCAD, not as a mesh, but as an object. And right. So a little bit convoluted, but certainly a quick, well, relatively free way. Google Earth is free. Now SketchUp Pro, I don't know, how much does it cost these days, do you know?
Close to 1,000, right?
Yeah, okay, so there is a cost there. I bet you there's going to be more and more options for bringing in geodetic information just through other ways. Google Earth was one of the very first ones that made it available to the public, but you know, that would be something to check out. Now we are at the 3 o'clock mark, so we need to finish up. Any last things that, I mean, of course, there's lots you could show you. We joked about how you can spend 5 hours explaining things, and of course, you're a natural teacher, so you're going to want to, you know, say, here's how you do this and stuff. But anything else that we would be remiss if we didn't see?
So the other option was point cloud, and I just want to put that flavor in your mouth, because that's going to be the next technology that's going to really help us with getting a mass neighborhood essence within our 3D models. ArchiCAD has an awesome importer for point cloud. I have one in here, but let's not waste our time right now.
So you can bring in point clouds that are for context?
So my civil engineer sends out his drone guy, and his drone guy converts drone flight into point cloud, and then the point cloud comes into ArchiCAD as, in my case, pretty much the exact mesh that I have here, but in point cloud. So it's shooting in all directions, identifying the color of each pixel that it sees, and so it's not like it's not an entity, it's just a bunch of points. But when you look at them all together, it looks like the site in color.
Interesting. By the way, there's a comment from Dan Wyckoff. SketchUp Pro now has a subscription for $250 a year. So yeah, obviously very modest cost if you want to use some of their resources there. Does Enscape have a Google Earth plugin?
No, you can't do any generating anything in Enscape.
Okay.
It's just a visualizer.
All right. It's coming from Thomas Palmer saying you could use a shell or dome to map background sky as well. I suppose that could work. David Lohmeyer asks, and this will be the final question, can you talk about your layer combos and method?
Layer combos and what?
Method, like how you approach layer.
My method, okay, so the concept
is madness, yes.
Is madness, really. My concept is don't be shy about layers. I just don't buy into this, oh, we should only have 10 layers idea. No, we have the power to turn things on and off at will, and especially when you get into graphic overrides, then layers become even more important, because now I can identify very finite set of parameters in order to change the look of something. So this was kind of started with an old AutoCAD kind of nomenclature, but I mean, where I work, I got all these areas are for different versions of the plan, and you know, we're not willing to forsake A1 to move on to A2. We want to study A2 at the same time keep A1. So there's going to be optioning kind of things that we're looking at. You can see options are accounted for here. I work from the back forward, so I look at my layouts and I say, what do I need to put on there? And then those become all these. This is a little convoluted because I'm trying to find the sweet spot for what to show in 3D and who to give it to. For example, my HOA, Homeowners Association, wants my Enscape file, but it's so big that I need to strip it down for them. So I got 3D with no trees, 3D Enscape web has very little stuff on it, 3D showing my height limit elements. So in other words, I get a bunch of options. I think I will be able to trim that down later when I find the sweet spot of what can suit a lot of people without having to go individual. At the same time, I'm a big proponent of, if I need something a little bit different, elevations exterior, elevation with no furniture, elevation with no topo, elevations with interior furniture, I can do all that, and why wouldn't I? At some point, if I need that, I'm not going to limit myself and say, oh, I can't do it because I've already got too many layers. So that's my layer spiel.
I think that's pretty clear. So in a new project, are all of these layers and layer combinations already set up?
No, there's a base set, and they end up this way.
Okay, so you start with the base, and you know, in the course of a project, you are adding more stuff to it.
Yeah, and it's very individual. One project can lean on the landscape side. One project can lean on how many kitchens can I show them. So there's always going to be something different.
Cool. All right. Well, Duane, you've been very generous with your time. I think you've shown us some really, you know, eye-opening ways to approach some things. Obviously, some of it are specialized in terms of GDL programming, you know, and some of the things with Enscape. But overall, you know, you're just showing how when you use ArchiCAD effectively, there's just so many different ways that you can slice and dice and look at the project and output the project that will end up with a well-managed, you know, well-constructed, you know, design that the client will be happy with, and I imagine does not have issues with construction. If you're modeling as much as I know you are in 3D, then I imagine your change orders during construction are minimized?
To a certain extent, we have a good relationship with the contractor and we work with them a lot. So for the most part, he wants the ambiguity so he can make the decisions. But there are times when, and it's very helpful to come in and say, oh, just the last project I did, we got to move this steel beam because the owner changed their mind about a wine cellar. So now I can study that in the 3D model and be, since they're out there on site now, it's a whole lot more important to be accurate and concise and show everybody what the result is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and at what point does the contractor get involved? You know, are they involved at all during the design process, or only after it's pretty much, you know, gone to permit?
The particular relationship, the contractor gets most of the jobs. and we are sort of consulting to him as the production team and the design team as well. But so he is involved very early. He owns the interiors group too, so he's also involved very late, and we do a fair bit amount of communication between the two of us, especially the closer we get to construction.
Right. Okay. So that's a whole different relationship than many people have.
Right. Right. It is.
And obviously very successful. You're doing large, complex projects that I'm sure have a lot of detail in them. So we want to thank you, and Roger. I'm assuming, Roger, you're still there.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. For those of you who are in the ArchiCAD coaching program, I'll take a 5-minute break, then I'll launch that call. And if any of you want more information about any of the things that we talked about, like MasterTemplate or the ArchiCAD coaching program or my training, just send me an email at support@bobrow.com. And I'm looking forward to taking some of what Roger showed us and incorporating it. And Duane, I'm at least going to have a conversation with you about what you got there, because it would be great to be able to, possibly get more people to benefit from some of your work. So we can talk about whether there's any way that makes sense.
Fair enough.
All right.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everybody. I'll post the recording of this on my YouTube channel and on the ArchiCAD user website, probably within a couple of days. Be well. Thanks for joining us.